start that. Okay, good. That's on. All right. Here with Chris Brandlin. Do you prefer Chris or Christopher?
Chris is fine.
Chris, okay, good. Chris with District 42.
Correct.
District 42. We're here with the Before Mindset podcast. Okay, here we go. 3, 2, 1. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to the show. This is the Before Mindset podcast. I'm your host and its founder, Michael Rebello. I'm a 20-year-old entrepreneur who chose entrepreneurship over the traditional college path. Inspired and driven by my goal to retire my mother and help other Main Street middle Americans just like her learn about different asset classes to build long-lasting financial freedom, get back time freedom, and also to get back the liberty that they deserve. And speaking of liberty, okay, it's one thing to have your time back. It's one thing to leave your job. But the question is, we don't last forever, and we have to take care of our health. And the healthcare system hasn't exactly been the most easy on us. And we all know how that works. And if you've been following me for a while, you understand that the healthcare system is not exactly our friend at most times. But I can't speak on it as better than Chris can. Chris Brandlin, How are you doing, my friend?
Doing very well. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much. You're running for District 42.
Correct.
Yes.
Nevada Assembly District 42, which is mainly West Las Vegas. Let's call it that.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And I'd love to hear, why did you come to Freedom Fest, first of all? This is your first time along with mine, but what sparked you to come here?
Well, I like to gather with fellow patriots, and I was actually invited by my colleague, Erica Nelia, who is also the Republican nominee for Assembly District 9, which is right next door to my district. So we're actually working on a team effort to help each other, and we thought we'd share a table here and get a chance to introduce ourselves to everybody.
I love that. And, I think that's great too, especially when you have like neighboring counties coming together, or districts coming together, and, joining and unifying. But Chris, we talked about this for a little bit just before we started our show. But you're coming from California, you moved to Nevada.
Correct.
But I'd like to figure out why. What was that transition for? Like, what sparked that?
So California has had the highest departure rate since 2019 out of most states, and that was when I actually moved over to Nevada. So in 2019, a couple things happened. As I probably told you, I'm a licensed attorney. I've been a licensed attorney for 15 years.
Right.
I do probate trust and estate planning and trust litigation, but I am also a real estate attorney, and I'm also a real estate broker. So I taught myself pretty well because I want to be more advanced. There's a lot of reasons that people are leaving California. It's futile for a lot of reasons, but one of the main reasons is that it made it almost impossible to profit and kind of manage your own real property. And in my eyes, that's a constitutional right, is your property rights.
Yeah.
So one of the first things that they did is they did the Tenancy Protection Act of 2019, which we also call the Statewide Rent Control Act. So I still have all my family in California, and of course they need my help with kind of real estate law. Right. So I always help them, and I still have all my friends over there. But one of the things was it's called Assembly. It's AB 1482, which is basically the Tenancy Protection Act, Statewide Rent Control Act, which makes it probably impossible to manage your own real property. And what I mean is that if you own a property by an individual or LLC or corporation, how most people own the properties, you are restricted by the Tenancy Protection Act of 2019, which means that you can only get rid of a tenant for cause, which means as long as they're paying the rent, you have to keep them out as a tenant. And if you want to raise the rent, you can only raise it a very specific percentage, which is basically rent control.
Yes.
But the only way you can get around that, for a lot of situations, if you look through the lines, it's actually to own the property in your own living trust. And fortunately, I'm also a trust and estate planning attorney, so I know the benefits of holding property in a living trust. So, Michael, do you know the main purpose of doing a living trust?
I actually do not, unfortunately.
Okay. A lot of people think that it's to make sure you can distribute to individuals in your living trust, your beneficiaries.
Yep.
The main purpose is to stay out of the courts. You don't want the courts to have too much control over your estate, what you own, and what you want to give to your loved ones.
Interesting.
So if you own a living trust and you own real property, you can put your property into a living trust. What that does is, if you own a property in your living trust, all the escrow has to do after you pass away, they look at your living trust, they see a successor trustee, and they could actually have your successor trustees sell your real property and distribute it to all of your loved ones, okay? And that's what you have to designate in a living trust, is a successor trustee. But if you don't own a property in a living trust and you own it under your own individual name, Michael, as a single man or a married man. But what happens is the escrow officer or any kind of title officer will say, sorry, we can't let anybody sell the property until we get a court order appointing someone to be the administrator of your estate or the personal representative of the estate.
Interesting.
And it ties it up in the court. It makes it restrictive. In California, the probate courts are very backed up. So that's the one thing. So if you own the property in your living trust, not only does it make it easier to stay out of the courts and give the property to your loved ones a lot easier without even dealing with the court. It can happen right after you pass away, which is probably what you want after you pass away. You want to make it easier for loved ones. But that is one of the issues, is that you have to put your property into a living trust so you don't have the state restricting on how you can own and manage the property. So if you own the property in your living trust, you're not subject to the Tenancy Protection Act of 2019 for most purposes. There's very few purposes. It depends on how the size of the property that you own, because sometimes apartment complexes, you're going to be restricted regardless. So, it basically, and the property taxes are very high in California, just like licensed in Texas. That's are very high too. So what people have is they own this real property because they want it to build value, but all of a sudden, they can't even pay the mortgage because they can't rent it out for more than a fair market value or to a reasonable fair market value. They can't raise the rent. And if they have a problematic tenant, even if the tenant is causing haywire and giving you the middle finger to your face, you can't get rid of them.
Nope.
Because you have the Tenancy Protection Act. It favors, so California favors tenants over landlords. It favors employees over employers, hence all these organizations moving out of California. But here's another thing. It favors doctors over patients. People don't realize that. And that's why you have a medical malpractice cap, which means even if a doctor completely ruins your life, you can't sue them for the maximum limit. So there's a lot of things that actually work against the hard-working, tax-paying Americans in California. That's one of the reasons.
Interesting. And it's funny because I always pontificate this online with real estate. Always invest in the red states because you're not going to run into issues like that.
Yes.
And I didn't realize that California got to that point where you had all of these restrictions coming in. And that's why now that I understand that people are leaving California, they also don't invest there anymore.
Of course.
And just the fact that that exists, I mean, just recently, I think Mamdani just froze the rents in New York. Yeah. And you can see it. You can see it happening in California, in New York. And it's like for property owners, they're just getting completely mushed. And people invest in real estate to have at least some sort of passive income, or at least, maybe retire quicker. And now that's becoming virtually almost impossible in states like New York and California.
Yes. You can't thrive. And being prosperous is one of kind of the main values that we have as American citizens, right?
Yep.
That's why I do kind of promote the entrepreneurs, right?
Absolutely.
So just giving you an example, talking about the Tenancy Protection Act. So I always have to tell anybody that says, hey, I have a legal problem in California. I'm like, I'm in Nevada, but I can help you with the legal problem. But they said, if I want to evict a tenant, how long is it going to take to get a judgment and to get the sheriff to the front door to do a lockout? I tell them 6 to 8 months, sometimes longer. I only had to evict one of my tenants in my lifetime, and I've bought and sold properties, right? It was actually in Nevada. It was actually in Henderson, because I own my primary residence here in Las Vegas in my district, but I also own property in Henderson. It took me 2 weeks to get rid of the tenant, because you get through the constable, and it's a fast process. I'm like, now Nevada is becoming a red state, and you can see how it really favors the hard-earning, tax-paying Americans, how really work their hard off.
The backbone of America.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that was one. And the other thing, discussing how you want to give your property to your children a lot easier. Another thing that got people out of California is Proposition 19. So Proposition 19 made it, they changed a long-standing rule. They always had a parent-child transfer. If you own property in California and you want to transfer it to your children, you guess what? The property is excluded from reassessment because you're transferring it to your biological loved ones. But Proposition 19 changed that because they said you can only do it for your primary residence. If you invested and worked your ASS off to earn all these rental properties, guess what? Those are going to get reassessed, even if you worked hard to earn those, because they're not your primary residence. So what happened is Prop 19 went into effect in 2021. that is when a lot of Californians started selling their properties, because right before it went into effect, because they knew it was going to get reassessed, even if it was going to give it to their loved ones,
Right.
to get out of here. And Elon did the smart move. He sold all of his California crap and kind of got over to Texas. And, I have a lot of colleagues in Texas too, and I'm licensed in Texas. And yeah, you can see how it's a thriving state. And I do see a future in Nevada, and that's why I want to make Nevada a thriving state.
I love that. And, I love that mission too, because, I feel like everything that we work hard for, we should pass on to our kids. We should pass on to our next of lineage. And the fact that that's being blocked, it's like, you do realize these are the families that are building your state, that are building the country, that are doing everything we can to keep the economy going. We're producing, we're consuming.
Correct.
And when we try to at least do something a little bit more, what do we get? We get shafted.
Yeah.
And I hate seeing that. But I know we're cutting into our time. But Chris, what piece of advice would you give to somebody that wants to own a rental property or would like to get maybe some sort of passive income or at least want to have protection of their assets? Where should they start first right now to at least start going on that path?
First of all, I recommend for everybody to do a living trust, because most of the probates that I handle, basically it's all the children that can't really touch their parents' assets, which their parents wanted to give to them because the courts have control. I'm a constitutionalist, okay? You know what that means? The founding fathers did not want too much overreach by the federal government.
That's right.
Or the state governments, and that is how it should be. So if you want to basically have to give more to your children and thrive off your own real property, create a living trust, transfer your property to a living trust, and do it in a red state.
I love it. Ladies and gentlemen, you heard it from Chris himself. In the next episode, actually, this is going to be a part 2 series. This episode, we're talking about real estate and also how to invest smartly. The next one, we're going to talk about the healthcare industry. Right. So that's why I kind of dabbled in with doctors a little bit. But ladies and gentlemen, if you want to learn more about Chris and what he's doing, check out the video description below. Follow him on social media as well. YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and also X. You can follow him and his works there. And also you can check out his website in the description below. But anyways, build yourself better and bigger every day. Live better, live bigger. Always move everyone forward. Chris, thank you so much for coming on the show, my friend.
It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely.